Welcome to The Change Lead, the podcast providing leaders with the insight needed to get things done in a rapidly changing and complex world. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Connect with our community of like-minded leaders on our website, thechangelead.com. Welcome to The Change Lead with your host, Babatope Ipinyomi.
Hello and welcome. This is Babatope Ipinyomi from The Change Lead, and welcome to another episode of the Change Lead podcast. My guest today lives and breathes customer experience. He focuses on delivering business and customer value through customer-first, value-led transformations. My guest today is Richard Jeffries. Richard engages the C-suite. He looks across journeys and ecosystems to design and manage successful strategies, digital solutions, organizational models, and customer cultures. Today, Richard and I will have a conversation on customer experience in a rapidly changing world. So, hi, Richard. Thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you for making the time. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation, and welcome to the show.
No, thanks very much, Babs. It's a pleasure, and thank you for asking me. And I apologise for the background. There are no books, nothing educational, but at the moment we're decorating the whole place. So I think I found the only corner of our building at the moment that isn't just have stuff all over the place or dogs barking. So it's a nice little corner. Thank you very much.
It works perfectly. We'll be able to pay attention to the conversation.
Totally.
Yeah. So if we start with, so today we'll be talking about customer experience in a rapidly changing world. So if we start with just customer experience for a second. So a couple of years ago, you position yourself very deliberately as someone responsible for customer experience as opposed to customer services. Now, at the time, many people, myself included, we didn't quite get it. Like, why are you saying customer experience instead of just everybody will say customer services? Now, it would be good to hear from you. What is it? What is customer experience? Why is it so important? And like everything else that's changing, how has the role of customer experience evolved over time?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great opening question, perhaps. I guess taking it up to sort of its highest level, to me, customer experience now, and I can talk about, to your point, like how I've seen it change a little bit, is really connecting the customer story to the money story. And I think that's like hugely important. And actually, it's more than connecting. It's actually hardwiring the customer story to the money story. And I feel that, organizations really need to start looking and asking themselves, how does customer experience directly drive shareholder value for them? And that forces them to think, how do they hardwire customer satisfaction, however they measure customer satisfaction, to their revenue growth or their cost reductions or their complaints reductions or their churn reductions. But hardwiring customer satisfaction to actually a revenue outcome, I think, is really important. And if they do that, then they're going to be looking at things around improved scalability, reduced costs, I've said, and also delivering the kind of quality products that really drive retention and growth. And it forces that whole organization to be very customer centric. Importantly, and it shouldn't be forgotten, that it's also hardwiring the employee story. And I'm sure we're going to come on to that, or I can talk a little bit about that more around culture and values, because they really are the critical elements, in my mind, to a successful company-wide CX program. So overall, I know I've taken your question and looked at a very high level, but I'd love to see the narrative change for companies they talk now about profitability from our core businesses. I'd love them to talk about profitability from our customer obsession, and CEOs stand in front of investors on Investor Day and talk about how increases in customer satisfaction, however they measure that, have resulted in improved profits, reduced complaints, reduced costs, higher ROI on their product and digital investments, and improved employee satisfaction ratings. I think that's hugely important. And And it's happening in a lot of places. B2C is really doing that because B2C understands the importance of customers. I think in financial services, we're starting to see that happening in the insurance space, but I'd love to see that more widespread. The second part of your question was around sort of how have I seen that change over time? And I actually think the elements have probably always been with us. But now there's more of a framework and an understanding. I think we have better tools to measure, and there's an increased focus, rightly so, on areas like human-centered design to really bring the elements together. I mean, from my experience, when I first set up what we called eClient in the late 1990s, in a role that's almost identical now to the customer success, I guess we just didn't connect all the dots and link it to sales, to product, to customer support, to your point. And also we didn't have a meaningful way to capture the real-time feedback from customers and measure customer satisfaction in a way that we could link that to revenue. I suppose from my point of view, my journey has taken me from being, at that point, I was probably more emotional and tangible. I really believe that if we treated the customers the right way, the right outcomes would follow without really measuring the individual OKRs we needed to do that. So actually, I think it's a very long answer to your first question, but actually we did all the right things, but they were probably more art than science. And now I think we're all better and people are better at merging that art and science to create meaningful experiences and interactions for our customers and to monitor and measure the results and the outcomes of these. So that's a very long answer to a great first question.
No, perfect. I like that. I think I like the concept of joining the customer story to the money story. I think that's something that any leader, once you understand that narrative, it's easy for them to go to their shareholders to make the case for customer experience. I think that becomes important. There's something you touched on there, human-centered design, which I've not heard a lot of. Can you just expand on that a little bit? I think that might be quite key to having the right focus.
Yeah. So I think I mean, everyone has their own sort of tools and methodologies, but for me, when you're really designing, when you're looking at a solution or you're ideating something new, I really, we all need to put the customer or the person or the employee at the center of that. And human-centered design is a methodology that I've really bought into that allows you to do that. So you don't go into a room with a lot of people and just say, what is the problem and how we're solving it? And the loudest voice is the one that's heard, for example. It's a way of actually looking at a solution, looking at a problem, or, as I said, trying to come up with a solution that puts the customer or the person centrally to that gets a group of people in a room where there should be real cognitive diversity, something that I'm passionate about. It gives everybody a voice. And you've got lots of different tools that you can use, but the general rule is that you would try and diverge to get a lot of thoughts and a lot of opinions, and then you would converge to focusing on some of those, and you may do that twice. So it allows you to be it's a very creative way of looking at problems and in a way that gives everybody a voice and isn't, as I said, just the most senior or loudest person in the room. So something that I'm extremely passionate about.
Wow, no, thank you. That's very insightful. I think thanks for that.
Pleasure.
When I think of customer experiences that I think are brilliant, the examples that come readily to mind are, and these are like Southwest Airlines, their flight attendants, they go out of their way in many cases to make, when they're announcing the flight safety announcement, they make it as fun as possible.
Yeah.
Another example is you go into a store and the person serving you actually takes the time to make eye contact, smiles, makes small conversation. So a lot of these examples of brilliant customer experience are offline, but the reality of our world today is a lot of things are through, we experience or work with services through digital channels. So we discover services through digital channels. We transact, we buy the service through digital channels. Sometimes we actually use the service through a digital channel. We're reviewing the service through digital channels. So the digital channels have become so central to the way we deal, we interact with our services and our products today. So how has this, and it'd be good to get your thoughts on this, how has this impacted customer experience? Is there still quality customer experience given this digital channel?
No, that's another great question. Another great question. And actually, I think you've probably touched on the answer already. I think you may have answered your own question in a way that I think we do talk about digital channels, but I think when it comes to customer experience, I think it's the digital personal balance is what's really central to the customer experience. And I think those companies that provide the right balance are those that stand out. You've given a couple of examples there. There are lots of examples around that. And as you said, it doesn't have to be anything outstanding. It could be something memorable, like as you said, around those airlines that do their safety announcements in a funky way. It could just be somebody in a shop that just has a little chat with you when you check out. And some shops actually, the checkout staff are encouraged to engage customers and have conversations. Other stores, the checkout staff are, I wouldn't say incentivized, but they're encouraged to just get throughput of people as quickly as they can. So it's different. So I think it's that we talk a lot about digital. I think it's the balance that's really important. And I guess I'm going to give a couple of examples. One is, I suppose, just a credit card. And if you think, to your point, there are things that you really want to do online. You want to check your balance. You might want to make a payment. There are other things you may want to do, and you're very happy to do that online. You can do that in your time, and that's ease in terms of you doing that. Imagine if there's a fraudulent transaction on your credit card, then actually you really I would like somebody to phone me, to be proactive. I wouldn't want to see that fraudulent transaction and then phone them. I'd want somebody to phone me. I want them to explain the situation to me, to tell me what's going to happen, to remain in contact with me until it's resolved, which may take hours, it may take days, but to talk me through that. And that's the balance. And I think the ease element you get through the digital piece, I suppose the sort of transparency and the trust element perhaps is what you get through the human interaction. And it's getting that right balance. And I've been extremely fortunate to have lived and worked in the US, in Europe and in Asia. And when we talk about digital and when we talk about personal and when we talk about the balance, it's absolutely about understanding your customers. Different segments, different demographics, different cultures respond very differently. And I think, it shouldn't be one size fits all. And it's also around, as you've said, understanding those simple versus complex interactions and putting people where they most add value to the customer. So I think it's about knowing your customers, however you define your customers and demographics and those kind of things, and getting that right balance. I think the companies that go all in on digital, they might have the demographic that works for, but I think the customers that are the ones I see winning over a long time are the ones that have that balance right, and are happy to kind of adjust that balance as and when they need to.
That's insight. So you need to get the digital personal balance right.
Yeah.
And it's all context specific as well.
Yeah, and I also think, sorry, just another example. In the segment that we're in terms of banking, there's a lot of interaction that we have with customers. And I think when it comes to recovery, when you have to apologize to a customer, and believe me, I've had to do that a lot of times, then that personal interaction is a real differentiator. If you're solutioning with customers, and increasingly customers don't want you to sell a product, they want you to solution with them, then I just think that has to be a personal interaction. And that comes back to the trust that we spoke about. But I can't see, I just see those kind of the lifetime value you get, the trust that you get is built around that personal interaction. So it's around knowing your customers and getting that right balance.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks for that. I think you mentioned the banks, which is one of the sectors we work in. These are large organizations. And typically with large organizations, they tend to have, you can call them several layers. So you have a massive sales team, a huge product team, a huge support team, a huge development team.
Yeah.
In some cases, the voice of the customer has to go through all these layers to get to the actual individuals who are providing value to the customer. Okay. So, and it's also easy. It's almost like Chinese whispers sometimes, where the customer says something. By the time anyone who's actually providing value to the customer gets that information, it's been completely distorted. So what advice would you give based on your experience and insight? What advice would you give to businesses who, large organizations, who you can't get away from these layers? How do you avoid the customer's voice being drowned out, given the fact that you have all these layers?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and I think to the point you made, um, people often talk about the customer's voice not being heard at the kind of lower levels. I hate to say that, lower levels, but actually the customer's voice generally isn't heard at the top levels as well. So you're right to say it's kind of through those layers of those organizations. Um, I mean, Babs, I tend to kind of oversimplify things, I know, but actually, I think the answer is relatively simple. We just don't see it done as often as it should be, to my mind, and we can talk about that perhaps. And what I think is that if a company sets a set of common goals from the top down, it has to be from the top down, that are aligned to customers, then that brings everyone together. It's very simple. It makes everybody a stakeholder in a set of customer related OKRs or goals or KPIs, however you want to talk about those. And it rewards everybody for their part in that. Again, very simplistically, but I just think that, and generalizing hugely here, but if you look at a large organization, to your point, sales, what rewarded for in-year sales, product rewarded for delivering products on time and under budget, perhaps professional services in fintechs, rewarded for monetizing their time, service and operations rewarded for cutting their costs, so customer success rewarded for reducing churn and lifetime value. And then we're surprised when there's a lack of customer centricity and cross-functional cooperation. I just think it comes down to having a set of common goals at the start and that being driven by the top. And there's a lot more I could say to that question around tooling, everyone having access to undiluted customer feedback with common calls to action, understanding personas, all that kind of stuff. But I think they're playing at the margins. I think you just align everyone around a common set of customer related goals, and that drives the outcomes, the culture that we would love. And that was the heart of your question.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. Thinking about it, because it's something, what you describe is something we've seen where you have a misalignment of incentives. I totally agree with that, and I find it, and maybe we can dig into this a bit more. I find it, most leaders find it hard to align organizations. They've probably come through one area of the organization. So you're either coming from the customer service side or from the business development side, and even though they lead the entire organization, they still have the hat of one area.
Yeah.
I don't know what else, but this is a big challenge with organizations failing to align to a single goal, be it customer centered. But I don't know if there's any. It's probably a broader question. Any things you could think for leaders to get that alignment right?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew the answer, and perhaps if I knew the answer, I'd be the CEO of a company rather than somebody running CX. It's really hard, if you're the CEO of a company, we know this. You've got it's a very short-term game that I think you're in. You've got to deliver results to your shareholders year on year on year on year on year. And it's probably not that easy to say, actually, this is my 5-year plan. We may see our EBIT or our revenue or whatever it is go down in the next 3 years, but actually then it's going to be the hockey stick effect going up. I'm not sure how many groups of shareholders would give CEOs that time. But so perhaps that's one of the challenges, is there's that contradiction that CEOs want to do the kind of things that we're talking about here, but they're just hamstrung because they can't convert an organization to do that in the space of a year. I'm not sure, but I'd love to think that it's doable. And I think even if you start aligning some goals without just aligning the whole organization and changing everything overnight, you just start getting people to cooperate together and to be aligned. Then over time, that has to, I feel, just kind of grow and be I guess, sort of petri dish for the culture that you want to grow, and then be more and more customer centric and get more and more people working together. So I just think it's doable. There are just some real world challenges that CEOs are facing.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks. That's very insightful. I think when I think of the challenges CEOs face in terms of choosing a strategy or how they approach business, one business model that's been very intriguing to me of recent is when businesses take on a platform strategies. What I'm referring to as a platform strategy, sometimes called an ecosystem strategy,
Yeah.
where you have a lot of users, but your revenue comes from more partners rather than users. A good example is YouTube. So YouTube has about 2 billion users. Well, last time I checked, 2 billion users, but their revenue comes from a very small number, well, relatively small number of advertisers and people who pay a premium service. We see this model followed by news outlets, by likes of LinkedIn, Facebook, without mentioning names, even within the financial service organizations, we see them adopting the same model where you look to monetize data or monetize a network.
Yes.
So it's proven to be a very successful strategy. However, it's very easy to, who is the customer in this scenario?
Yeah.
So are there any insights or thoughts on how we approach this kind of strategy to ensure that you don't lose, who's the customer, and how do we don't lose sight of customer experience, even though you're not making money from the users?
I mean, that's a great question. And as you said, it's a question for now that lots of companies are facing with and are struggling with. And they're thinking, as you said, like, where do they fit into their ecosystem? What is their ecosystem? What roles do they want their partners to play? What roles do they want to play? Are they what's happening with their brand? How do they retain their brand? Is their brand even important to them? How do they monetize the roles they play? I think lots of people are thinking around that. I mean, to my mind, and it is tough, but I think it does start with understanding your area of expertise and how you differentiate yourselves. I think a lot of companies try and perhaps do everything in that ecosystem rather than just think, actually, this is my area of expertise. This is how I differentiate myself. What do I bring to that customer journey? And what part of that solution am I best placed to provide? I mean, by way of example, it's always good to give an example. I'm thinking of one now. I'm currently speaking to a company in the guest experience space. There's something called GXP, guest experience platforms, and this company is their expertise is in hotels, and they're very aware though that they can be an entry point to a far broader ecosystem. To your point, for example, people staying in hotels might want to look at theatres or museums and make bookings. They may want to book exercise classes. They may want to arrange transport somewhere. That could be the ecosystem. And they're very aware that they bring customers to the ecosystem, but the ecosystem can also bring customers to them. And I think it comes down to like knowing that and accepting that where it's your strength, in this case, this company that I'm speaking to in the hotel segment, they'll earn dollars from their primary area, but they'll also earn cents from the introductions and the connections they make across their ecosystem. So to your point, in some places you can earn the money where that's your primary focus, but in the other areas, it's just a numbers game where you're not earning a lot, but you just want to put that volume through. And that's how you earn it, which again, for you and I, is in the financial services space as well. If you're part of that ecosystem in payments, then you just want lots of payments to go through, and you can take cents from each transaction, and you do quite nicely out of it. So my advice to people, and this is what I'm talking to this company about, is know your business, know your area of differentiation, and really try and stick to those. Understand your customers and their journey and build experiences and solutions around these. To your point, though, you've got to work with partners that you trust, and you have to really agree a framework in terms of the way you work together, the standards, those kind of things. And that's where it can be very hard to do that. So you want to try and partner with companies that have the same kind of philosophy, I think, as yours. Always remember, to my mind, that journeys can start, and they often do start, before and after your company's involvement. So whether you like it or not now, you're probably part of some kind of an ecosystem. If you're I don't know if your insurance, perhaps not a great example off the top of my head, but if your insurance, it could be the the consolidators that you go to look up the best car quotes is the way into your company. So your ecosystem starting before you, if you like.
Yeah.
And a lot of airlines actually, I won't give examples now, just in the interest of time, but they're finding actually that their ecosystems and customer satisfaction is driven by arrival at the airport, check-in, through security. Can they get a coffee and a cake before they get on the flight? That all affects their satisfaction of the flight. So our definition of ecosystem can be quite broad, but I think it's keeping an open mind when it comes to partnering, but really focusing on your area of differentiation, your area of expertise, and working with partners who I think have a kind of like-minded philosophy to you, and that you feel you can really trust and work with. Sorry, that was a little bit of a vague answer, but hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. We're saying we focus on your strengths, focus on your core, business needs focus on their core strengths, and that way, and find out where they fit exactly in the ecosystem. And also an open mind of the ecosystem. It's very easy to imagine this is your view of the ecosystem, but when you study the customer journey, you realize the ecosystem might be slightly bigger or a lot more nuanced, because they're different paths as well.
Yeah, and when it comes back to, we spoke earlier about human-centered design, and thanks for picking up on that. You can just imagine going into a room, and it's pretty powerful where you're thinking, what is the ecosystem for payments, something you and I are close to, or travel, and you just go on, you just have a blank wall and post-it notes, and that just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, and then it becomes pretty powerful. And then your sense that you might get actually come in from lots of different places, and then it becomes quite a powerful solution or product that you can work with other people to build out for a customer.
Okay, all right, thanks. So something I like doing is I like looking at trends. So figuring out what's happened and what's happening, or what could happen. So in the space of customers, in the context of a rapidly changing world, are there things you've observed that of customer behavior changing? If we think about, we've just got over COVID, or we're just getting through the end of a COVID crisis, has there been anything significant in the way customers are behaving? And also, are there emerging trends that businesses need to be mindful of on what could be coming around the corner when it comes to the way customers behave?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd love to be able to say yes and give you an answer to something, and you go, "What? Like, wow, I never thought of that." I'm not sure. I think with COVID, I do think and I'd like to believe this, and I do strongly feel this, that there is a shift now. I think the companies that have looked after their customers through COVID, whether that's been through like open communication, through honesty, through transparency, lots of the stuff we've spoken around that drives trust. I'd really like to think that people will reward that trust, and where companies have been, I don't have to give examples where companies have been opaque, they've held on to customers' money, they've been very hard to get hold of. They've had purely digital strategies that have been opaque, where people can't phone somebody, something we said about earlier. I'd like to think that those companies will struggle because people will reward those companies that they trust, and they've needed companies that they can trust through COVID. I'd like to think that's a positive outcome of COVID, and that people are looking, as the customers, perhaps we're looking more deeply at our companies that we work with, or that we interact with. We're looking at how they treat their employees, their corporate and social responsibilities, those kind of things. I think were always there, but now we're far more aware of those, and we want to understand more about the companies than just the price. But obviously that's fanciful as well, because price is a huge factor, in our buying decisions. But I'd like to think we look more deeply at the customers. I thought my mantra has always been in the banking space, and I think this is across everywhere, that I always say to my teams, there are three things that we really need to have as our mantra, and that our customers want from us. One is, our customers want us to understand them, they want us to guide them, and they want us to make it easy for them to do business with us. That's kind of always been my thinking. And I just feel if you have those three things in your mind, then they kind of anchor you to do the right things. And whatever you do, you think, am I hitting on understanding them, guiding them, making it easy for them to do business with me? And lots of the emotional pieces that we spoke around transparency or trust or ease kind of wrap around that as well. So I think that kind of holds you true. To your point, what's changing, I said we spoke a little about COVID, but probably is actually the immediacy. We all want everything now as well. And that's in our lives where we want something now. But actually coming back to, again, banking, I've spoken to lots of extremely large global corporate customers in the banking space, and the move towards immediate settlements, and the end-to-end visibility of payments, certainly cross-border payments. You've got corporates around the world that are paying companies in Asia. I mean, I was in Asia for a few years, so I know this very well, for their parts, or they're paying farmers for their produce. And in days gone by, not long ago, banks were allowed, I guess if that's the right word, to take a few days or hours and days to process those payments, and they had to do sanction checks, manage liquidity, check the settlement instructions, all those things. Now there's a real move that the faster payments have to be done from hours and days to seconds and minutes, really. And that's a central need that we're seeing in the payment space, not just the B2C space. So I think it's understand me, guide me, make it easy for me to do business with you, and the immediacy is where customers are at. And to the point the answer I said earlier, and the point you made, I think COVID has hopefully just given people the chance to reflect on who they're doing business with, and making sure that those companies are doing business the right way, treating them the right way, and they'll reward the companies that they trust for those kind of behaviors.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. That element of building trust with your customers is so important. Knowledge is so much more freely available. People can find out what their suppliers are doing a lot easier. So
Yes.
it's almost impossible to be opaque right now, because
which is a good thing. I think transparency is
yes,
a great thing.
I totally agree. So you do need to build trust. It's maybe at some point it will have a monetary value that will be reflected on the share price, so that the market is a lot more reflective of trust, the trust that businesses are building with their customers as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I like those three things you mentioned there, where you need to know your customer, guide your customer, make it easy to serve for them to serve the customer, and that immediacy. Those are quite key. I think I'll take note of those. Those are important things.
They're yours.
that need to be applied. When I think of some of the challenges we've already discussed that are facing businesses like COVID, the fact that almost overnight we've been forced from working on a premises in an office to hybrid working as standard. Transitioning away from fossil fuels is a challenge lots of businesses will need to face in different ways. These are significant challenges that will, in some cases, challenge the foundations of certain business models. To deal with this, businesses will go through organizational, cultural changes, more effectively systemic changes. And it's very easy when organizations go through these changes to become very insular. They look at themselves and they forget the customer in the process of these significant changes that their business is going to make. So it would be good to get your thoughts on or insights on how can organizations going through organizational change, which this is my bread and butter, what I deal with. How do you ensure that businesses going through organizational changes can retain the voice of the customer while going through these very deep organizational changes?
Okay, that's a great question, and hopefully, my answer isn't going to do you out of a job. So, otherwise, you can cut this piece. I think you used two different words in there. One was sort of organizational change, and you spoke about the culture. And I think from the way that you know me and perhaps some of the answers I've given before, perhaps in some ways, I oversimplify things. In some ways, perhaps I'm very fanciful about the way things can be done, but that's the way that I am. I actually think the focus is cultural change, to be honest with you. And I think there's three words that I think are answering your question, is like, how is that driven? And I think the three words are, it's driven from the top. It has to be from the top. And I just feel that organizations have to adapt their cultures in different ways. Many already do this, some don't, but they have to adapt their cultures to accept challenge, reward creativity, encourage collaboration, build in that cognitive diversity that we spoke about with human-centered design, so everybody has a voice. Give their employees a voice and listen to that voice. Don't just give your employees a voice and don't listen to that voice. Give your customers a voice. We spoke about that before, and act on their voice. The worst thing you can do for customers is do a voice of the customer exercise and then be deaf to that. So I really think it's around a cultural change. It's very easy to say, but I actually don't think it's as hard to do as perhaps we think it might be, or we make it out to be. We spoke earlier about aligning goals. How about that for a start? Aligning goals, aligning culture, that brings everybody together with a common set of goals, talking about the customers, talking about the same things. That's not even saying that is customer support part of product, or is customer support part of customer success, or what is CX all about? That's culture. That's aligning the organization around the customer. I suppose practically, as we're talking about CX, the four things I can think of off the top of my mind. One, something I'm extremely passionate about, is give customer service a voice, and treat them as rev ops, not core ops and a cost center. Think of them as revenue generators. There's so many insights that they have and they bring. And to your point, actually, an email from a customer or a phone call from a customer is the undiluted voice of the customer. It's not somebody coming back and saying, oh, the client said this. Give customer service a voice. I'd like to see organizations focus more on lifetime value. We spoke about that before. That changes the culture, that you've not just got people thinking about how are they going to do this year, and in terms of their revenue generation or their churn reduction. And generally that might mean, what does that mean to them, not what does that mean to the customer or the organization. So really try and build a program that drives everyone around the lifetime value of that customer. Sorry, I'm saying four things. That's customer service, lifetime value. I would place an importance on the voice of customer success. And I know, we said before, that's a relatively new term, customer success, but it's something that I was doing in the late 1990s. And I think if you're going to have a customer success group, then you really need to listen to what they're saying. They generally are perhaps the most undiluted voice of the customer outside of what the customer might say to you in person or send you an email. And four, which we've touched on already, is just ask yourself time and time again, how does customer experience directly drive shareholder value? That just has to ground you in doing things that are needed for your customer. And I think if you start with something like that, or you take two of those four things, it'll naturally drive a cultural change and build a more customer-centric organization. And I know we mentioned organizational change, and I know that's what you do, Babs, but my feeling and my experience is that the focus should be a cultural and a values-based one. And you get that right, and then you can look at the organizational side. I think, or the organizational side will kind of take care of itself, but I think it has to be a cultural change to really drive that customer centricity.
Yeah, no, I think I like that. I like that analysis you provided there. And when you started, like, it starts from the top. I think that is quite key.
Yeah.
When I started looking at and doing a lot of analysis on different change initiatives across the board, I came up to the conclusion. This is something I say to a lot of people: is in leadership is all about change, and change is all about leadership. As in, if you're going to change an organization in any way, it does start from the top. It does start with the leadership.
Yes.
And it's not something that can be delegated. As in, what we've come to from this conversation so far is customer experience is critical, is essential, but for it to be successful, it is about the leadership. It does start from top. And that cultural change you're referring to needs to come from the top.
Yeah,
Really.
and CX, as you said, has to be embedded and embedded in that culture. One of my, I don't want to be negative. I want to be positive with you, but one of my fears for things like customer success is that if they're not connected to the money story, going back to the first question, the first point, then they kind of become yesterday's buzzword and buzz team, and I think it's bringing that CX model, however you define that CX model, with customer success, customer service, the right tools. If that's embedded as part of your organization and part of your strategy, and everyone lives and breathes that, then it's going to work. If it's competing with the rest of the organization, then I think that organization, it's a challenge for that CX model to succeed, or certainly more of a challenge.
Cool. No, thanks. This has been very, very insightful, actually, very insightful. A lot of insights of how we position ourselves to improve, how customer experience is essential in a rapidly changing world. Just in closing, I think it would be really good for our audience to know a little bit more about you, what you're doing right now. Any final words you want to share as well? It would be good to just to get that from you, and how people can contact you as well.
Oh no, great. So the most important question you left to last. And it's just, I actually think, and thanks for that question, Babs, by the way. I just think, like, with everything that we've discussed, and you can tell from what I'm saying, I mean, there really is an opportunity for experienced experts to help companies, define, design, enshrine their CX strategies and their models. I really feel that. And I just think that companies don't want to hear and pay for theory anymore. They really want, and in fact, what they really need is help from people who have experience designing CX models, implementing digital solutions, meeting customers. They need help from people that really sort of bear the scars. Believe me, I bear the scars. Know the pitfalls, but also those people that know how to deliver and succeed. Generally, they're the same people. You kind of bear the scars, you learn how to succeed. So the reason that I've set up a company called CX All is to provide, advisory, consultancy, implementation, training around the sort of human-centered design stuff that we spoke about. Those services to companies, really across all segments and locations. I want to help them hardwire that money story to that customer story to create lifetime value to their shareholders and to their customers, and ultimately to help them answer the question that has been the thread through our chat, which is, how does customer experience directly drive shareholder value? So that's really why I've set up CX All. I'm very happy to speak to people about any aspect of that, and the easiest way, I guess, for people to contact me now is through LinkedIn, or through you if they know you. But one of those channels is probably the easiest way to have just an initial conversation. I'm very happy to do that.
Perfect. No, thank you, Richard. What I'll do is I'll make sure I have links to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes as well, so anybody accessing this can easily get hold of you. Thank you very much for making the time to do this, and thanks for being very generous with your insights as well.
No, my pleasure, Babs. And listen, thank you very much. And it's great that you're doing these, and brave of you to do these as well. And I just think the more people that you can get to talk from the people and from industry expertise about whatever aspect is their area of expertise, the better. So, all power to you for doing this. Thank you very much for asking me.
Thank you very much.
All right, then. Take care.
Thanks.
Would you like to learn more about customer experience in a rapidly changing world? Would you like to join in the conversation on how great customer experience leads to business success? Connect with a community of like-minded leaders on our website, thechangelead.com. When you visit our site, click Join to join the community. Check out the show notes for details on how you can contact Richard. Also, please don't forget to like, comment, review, and subscribe. Thank you very much for tuning in. Have a great week, and see you next time.